Babylon 5, The Road Home. This movie takes place 2 years after the end of the Shadow War and begins with John Sheridan preparing to leave Babylon 5 for his new position as president of the Interstellar Alliance. One of Sheridan's first acts as president is to give his blessing to a new power generator for one of the cities on Minbar. When the generator is activated, the tachyons created unstick Sheridan in time and space, and he begins jumping to different places, points in time, and even alternate timelines. For instance, we get to see a scenario where the Shadow War was lost, and we also see a scenario where the Shadow War never happened. This matched up pretty well with alternate timelines that were alluded to in the original B5 series. Zathras figured into a lot of this and had a very interesting line that I will let the old man talk about. Eventually, Delen's love acts as a beacon and helps guide Sheridan home. And that was essentially just the main plot of this movie, because I don't want to give away each jump and tell exactly what happened there. There should be a few surprises if people haven't seen it already and are going to. So, with that said, just the basic bare bones of the story, why don't we start talking about the pieces that we found most interesting?
For me, it took me a while to get used to the different voice actors, because a lot of the original actors sadly have passed away since the series ended. The biggest one that I had trouble getting used to was the actress that they had playing Delen now. And I was starting to get used to her after a while. I had to watch enough of this new actress to detach the character of Delen from the actress Mira Furlan, who played Delen. We watched an interview of JMS leading up to this movie where he said when they were casting some of these voice actors to replace the roles, they weren't looking for somebody to repeat the performances of the original actor. So in this case, they weren't looking for somebody to imitate Mira Furlan. But what he said in that interview was he wanted to find an actress, a voice actress, who could present elegance with her voice. And I think they got that right here, because I do think that the elegant part of Delen, the actress, was able to portray that in this. I also thought the actor who played Garibaldi, I thought that didn't take much to get used to. I think that actor, although he wasn't imitating Jerry Doyle, I think he was able to channel what the Garibaldi character was. So that character worked pretty well for me almost from the get-go. It didn't take me much time to get used to Garibaldi's voice. Now, this is just because I've watched these Babylon 5 episodes many times, and I've gotten used to the voices of the characters. I think that's why I was having the problems. I think if somebody was watching this who didn't spend all those decades rewatching Babylon 5, I'm not sure they would have that problem. So I guess what I'm saying is I think overall I thought that they cast the replacements for the voice actors fairly well. And even, as I said, the Delen voice actress, it's not that she did a bad job. It's just I associate Delen with the accent that Mira Furlan had, and plus she had a certain cadence to her voice, and it took a while to get used to this new actress, but I did get used to her. And I think the best voice that I swear this person, it's like they never stopped playing the character, was Peter Jurasik, who plays Londo. He sounded spot on like he did when he did the series. That was a perfect voice. Obviously, that was the original actor still. He did a fantastic job. And then there were some other voices where I was having some issues just figuring out what type of take they were taking on it. So Claudia Christian as Susan Ivanova was the original actor. There were times she was channeling Ivanova and other times that I was confused what was going on with her voice. And I think Mollie and I both agreed with this. The artwork was a different artwork take than maybe we would have preferred. From my point of view, it kind of had an anime look to it, but I know anime's super popular right now. And if that's what that takes to get people to watch this, I'm fine with that.
I thought they did an excellent job on the backgrounds and the Babylon 5 station itself. The exterior shots were amazing. All of the ships looked gorgeous. My biggest problem was that initially I had trouble telling the different brunette actresses apart. Again, once I got used to them, I could pick out features that helped me distinguish who was who. But initially, it was very difficult for me. I don't know. Maybe that's just a problem that I have. But it seemed like they could have made them a little bit more distinguishable from each other than just a different set of eyebrows on one or a different hairstyle on another. Because in my opinion, the actresses in real life, they didn't look that much alike, but these drawn versions of them really, really did to me. So that was really my one complaint about the characters, was that I think that the very simple drawing style made it hard for me to tell who was who sometimes. And then I would just have to listen to dialogue to try to figure it out. So that was a bit frustrating, but once I got used to it, it was all right.
For me, the one character that I could tell who it was, because there was only one Narn in the movie, but I'm not exactly sure what they were doing with Jakar. He didn't really look like Jakar to me. It was a different voice actor, because obviously the original actor has passed on. But the look of Jakar to me, Mollie and I were talking, he looked to me like the Martian Manhunter from like the DC universe. He didn't look like Jakar to me. And I was having trouble dealing with that. That's not to say the voice actor didn't do a good performance. I think I could have gotten used to the different voice actor. It's just the look along with the voice made it hard for me to say that was Jakar.
I agree with that. I thought the same thing. Again, some of the faces, they just seemed very angular and very similar to each other. I guess too symmetrical in a way, because obviously people were not perfectly symmetrical. And I found it hard to figure out who was who sometimes. And yeah, Jakar, his face was too narrow for me. I guess I'm just really into face shape kind of stuff.
Well, even like the coloring didn't quite seem right either. And
yeah,
the outfit he was wearing, although it was similar to what Jakar wears, he had like this thing in the front.
Well, maybe now is a good time to talk about that line from Zathras.
Yeah.
Because I think that helps explain what some of this stuff was and why it was the way that it was.
Now, the following is speculation on our part. So if somebody has information, we did not have access to the commentary on the Blu-ray because we didn't get the Blu-ray. We watched it through Amazon, and they only had the one audio stream, which was just the dialogue. But there was a line from Zathras that was very similar. If any of you watched our review from the last Matrix movie, what the Wachowskis were doing in that, they had a character in that movie that said some odd line about something reboot. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but in the video we covered it quite a bit. It's been like over a year, closer to 2 probably, since we covered that. And in this movie, Zathras said something very similar. And the reason I'm comparing those two is because in that review for The Matrix, the last movie, we were speculating that was the Wachowskis giving us us the audience, some sort of message that they didn't want to make this reboot and they were under guidelines on what they could get away with in the reboot. The character's dialogue just kind of was like almost a breaking the fourth wall type thing. Yeah,
because in that, Neo was basically told by the company that he had 2 choices. He could either work on the video game or not, but the new version was going to get made with or without him. I think that in the Matrix movie, anyway, the most recent one, there were other instances throughout that film that seemed to allude to being forced to work on this latest iteration. It seemed like there was more going on there than just one of the Wachowskis wanted to make another Matrix film. In fact, only one of them worked on it. It really appeared to be under duress. At least that was just the perspective that we got. And then in the Babylon 5, The Road Home,
it's not that we're suggesting the duress is the similarity. I think JMS really wanted to work on this.
Yes.
So that's not the messaging we're saying they're communicating here.
It all comes back to who owns the IP, the intellectual property rights. in this instance, it was interesting because this was when John Sheridan met up with one of the Zathrasses, or Zathros. I mean, Zathros.
Well, one of the
Zathros. I mean, I don't know. It was funny. But anyway, he meets up with one of the Zathroses. He's telling him that he's lost in time and he's lost in... And then Zathras cuts him off and says that they already have enough issues with potential copyright lawsuits or something to that effect.
I don't think they said potential copyright issues or something like that.
Copyright issues, something like that. It seemed to be another one of those breaking of the fourth wall kind of things.
Because what we're wondering here, and we don't know this. This is just speculation, but that line was interesting about Zathras stating, we've got enough copyright issues. There were a few things that you could excuse away in this movie as, well, we were just saying there were these endless alternate timelines. So when stuff almost matched up, you could just argue it was a different timeline that was slightly different than what you're remembering from the series. Or you could argue that, was this a situation where this was made with only partial rights to certain things? Kind of like how when Secret Hideout makes Star Trek, they have to license certain aspects of proper Star Trek in order to use those original items from Star Trek into Strange New Worlds. What we were wondering is, was that JMS saying something like, guys, this property is in rights limbo, and I had enough pull and enough ownership myself to get a good portion of the rights needed to make this. But in some of these pieces, we're going to have to do stuff that's similar to what the proper piece would be because we couldn't get the licensing for that. Now, am I saying I know that for sure? No, I'm not. But some characters and events seem to line up a lot better than others. Like Londo seemed to be, that was a fully licensed character that was Londo like Londo has always been. But then characters like Jakar, and yes, the different voice actor, but the drawing interpretation made it kind of look like he was a different character.
Well, it's possible that they didn't have the license to use the original actor's likeness.
That's possible, too.
And so they had to make those changes because that's one of the things that the current Screen Actors Guild and the Writers' Strike, using of likenesses of actors and actresses without their consent, who owns the rights to that? That's one of the things that they're arguing over right now. In this instance, we have some actors and actresses who unfortunately are no longer with us, and they're making this animated version of Babylon 5. So who owns that likeness of Jakar? Is it the original actor's estate, or is it JMS, or is it Warner Brothers? Who owns that likeness? I would say it's probably the estate, I would assume, but we don't know. I think that might be why some of these characters didn't look quite right, because they didn't have licensing to use that actor's likeness.
Well, there were other slight deviations too, not just with the looks. There was an alternate reality where Ivanova, if one remembers War Without End, there was that video communication they intercepted of Ivanova in a burning up, we assume it was a CNC from Babylon 5, and she was talking about how they're coming in, they're going to kill us. And there was a very similar setup here. Some slight differences, like in the proper series, she was wearing her black uniform that happened after they broke away from Earth. But in this flash sideways, I guess we'll say, she was wearing her blue Earth Force uniform. And in the series, part of that speech she gave in that communication was that they rigged the fusion reactors to blow, and that was rigged before she started the communique. But in the flash sideways in this movie, she didn't state that, and in fact, Sheridan was helping to, after she gave that speech, to set off the reactors himself. So it happened after that. So there are things like that, which normally, if this was any other production, I would say, you know what, you got it close enough, it doesn't matter. But following JMS like I have, This guy seems like he is a stickler for details, and I cannot imagine. I mean, maybe some slight deviations I could see, artistic freedom, but JMS, not only is he the creator of this show, but he would easily fit in sitting next to us watching other science fiction shows. He's one of us, as they say. So he would be one to sit there and critique these sort of things that are different himself. So I just find it hard to believe that these sort of differences, which were very close to what was happening in the TV series, but when there were things that were off like that, in narrative you can say, well, in narrative, there was an alternate reality here, and so they stated up front that these were not going to be exactly the same. They were going to be slightly different realities all over the place. And that, at face value, that could be it. Or it could be some brilliance on JMS's part saying, I couldn't get all the copyright stuff I needed, but by just tweaking stuff, I can still tell the story and skirt the issues that we're dealing with, because in the end product is really what I wanted, and the little details don't really matter as far as the overall story you're trying to tell.
Copyright issues. They are really something sometimes.
Now, that's just speculation on our part. We may be way off on that, but between what Zathras said, that was an odd line. As soon as he said that, Mollie and I looked at each other and we paused the video and said, is this another Matrix situation where he's trying to tell us something without telling us something?
I would assume so, because I can't imagine that Zathras would be interested in copyright issues. That just doesn't make sense otherwise. So they were talking to the audience. They were trying to explain something.
Now, that said, I enjoyed this film quite a lot. I know we've gone many minutes into this video without giving an opinion on what we thought. I enjoyed this movie quite a lot. It kept my interest, seeing the different times that he was visiting. He visited Zahadum when the Icarus landed, and in theory, when Mr. Morden and Anna were taken by the shadows. It was cool seeing Sinclair. They had an alternate reality where Sinclair was still in charge of Babylon 5 when they encountered the shadows. There was a battle scene inside Babylon 5 where Garibaldi, Sinclair, and Sheridan were in the hallway setting up some sort of perimeter to stop the shadows. And just seeing Sinclair give orders and sitting there with that gun getting ready to fight. I always liked the Sinclair character. I know in real life, the challenges they had with Michael O'Hare and how they had to recast him. But that Sinclair character, I liked a lot from season 1. And it was nice to see this. I think other than they changed his hairstyle a little bit, and again, that goes back to early in our video. But other than changing the side of his hair a little bit, they had some like lines on the side, which I don't remember seeing in the actual series. But the voice actor, the characterization of Sinclair, I thought was pretty spot on. It's like we were seeing Jeffrey Sinclair in animation. So that was a nice tribute to Michael O'Hare, who's no longer with us. I enjoyed that scene a lot. It was really enjoyable to watch. They never stayed in a place too long where you were getting bored of the situation. And like Mollie said, the backgrounds were fantastic to look at. A lot of what happened with the characters, they were well done. I just don't really care for that anime art style. Like Mollie mentioned, it just seems like the characters all look too similar, and I think that's my biggest problem with them.
Yeah, there was this one jump that Sheridan did, and he went home to his family farm, and the time period was just after he'd taken over as captain of Babylon 5. The backgrounds were stunning. There were cornfields with tremendous detail. There was the house, the barn, just the setting was absolutely gorgeous. So they did a fantastic job on that. As I said, I wish that the characters' faces had a little bit more to them so that it was easier for me to tell characters apart.
And we're purposely not giving away specific setups that were relived or almost relived, because the story, it reminded us a lot of the storytelling technique that they used in the TNG finale, All Good Things, when Picard was in those 3 different time periods and he was trying to solve something. This wasn't exactly that, but it was very similar as far as the type of technique used to storytell.
The premise was similar, jumping around in different points in time as far as that goes. But that's really where the similarity ended, because the stories within those jumps were completely different. Yep. And the overall story was completely different. So the only thing in common was just the space-time jumping. We don't want to give away what happened in most of those jumps because, well, that's really giving away and spoiling the whole story itself.
Yeah, that's the thing, too, is I don't know if somebody hasn't seen Babylon 5, other than just appreciating the art of what this is, I don't think a person like that will get as much out of it as somebody who is sitting there waiting. Ooh, I remember that. Ooh, I remember that. And they were actually fleshing out pieces of what could have happened or close enough what could have happened. And that's really where the strength of this movie is if you're a Babylon 5 fan and you've seen the series, a couple times through, so you know pieces of dialogue and you know settings and story items, you're going to really, really, really get into this because both Mollie and I fit into that category and we both really, really, really got into this.
One thing I would like to say is I know Crusade got canceled. So again, this is a ridiculous pipe dream on my part, but I really enjoyed that show and I was disappointed that there was no ending for it, or at least no wrap-up end. It just ended. I want to see how that turned out. I want the story to have a proper ending, as opposed to it just ends without any real resolution to the situation. So hey, if they want to make more animated Babylon 5, maybe the Crusade spinoff might be a good place to start.
And that's the thing too, is although I appreciated the alternate reality version of this just for revisiting all these what if moments, if they do continue with more of these animations, and I really hope they do, even with the art style that's not my favorite, I was accepting the art style when we got toward the mid to the end of this. If they do more of these in that same art style, I hope that they tell more straightforward stories, because the jumping around uniqueness of this episode, this movie, like, it worked for this movie, but I don't think I want to have more stuff that's like this.
Well, it didn't really move the franchise forward. It fleshed out some things from the past, and I guess it filled in a few gaps, but it didn't really move anything forward. So I think, at least for me, if they were going to make more of these, they would have to find some way to work this into the timeline in a way that they could actually start moving the story forward.
And then that goes back to what we talked about earlier. And again, speculation. But if indeed this was a rights issue of getting all the rights needed to make this, and if JMS was able to modify things enough so he could get this production made, but because you had the backstory of these alternate timelines that didn't have to line up exactly, you could get away with that. Well, what we're asking for, if that is the case, and again, I don't know if it is, that would make it difficult to make more straightforward stories, because if there is a licensing issue for a lot of this stuff, how would that work?
I'm hoping that the majority of the issues are just about using likenesses of characters and actors who have passed away. But,
It might not even be any of that. Maybe just JMS said, I want to make these things different for whatever reason. To me, that just seems odd that he would do that, because this is his property from day one. And you would think that he would want to put out a authentic version of this, as authentic as he could possibly assemble.
Well, sometimes you get these people who want to fix things that they didn't feel they got right the first time. Unfortunately, often you end up with a George Lucas situation where then he admits that, well, maybe that wasn't so good.
I don't think he was trying to fix anything here, though. It didn't seem like he was contradicting. Like I said, that one scene where Ivanova was talking about they're killing us, and the reactors. I don't think it mattered to him whether what uniform she had on or whether the reactors were set to explode before or after. I mean, I don't think he was fixing anything there.
Well, I think they had to give something of tension for Sheridan to do in that situation.
Yeah, because he had to, like a video game, he had to flip like these switches around this reactor to set it off, and he was being stopped at various moments from doing that.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that's what that was really about, was that they had to give his character something to do. And one could argue, just by the fact that he's present in this version where he wasn't before, that changes things enough that, well, it changed things.
I wish they would have gotten a little bit more into these alternate realities. Before the Zathras line about the copyright stuff, Mollie and I were trying to figure out why stuff was happening, why Sinclair was around in one of these flash sideways. And so, we were speculating like we would do. Like, so is this a matter of, Mollie was asking, so maybe in this reality, the Minbari never encountered the Earth ship, so Dukat was never killed, so the war never started. And if the war never started, then Sinclair may not have gotten that command post on Babylon 5. And then if he didn't get that command post and didn't meet the Minbari, then he wouldn't have went back in time.
He wouldn't have become Valen, and then they wouldn't have had the Minbari as allies when the Shadows attacked, and thus we lose the Shadow War.
So those are what Mollie and I were talking about, which would be cool. None of that was explored directly in this movie. Implications of what could have been, but in narrative, nobody said the words of this is what happened or anything like that. So we were spending a lot of time talking about this, and that's just something positive about this movie. If we were actually, it's not like we were pausing it and like ripping on it. We were pausing and like getting into it and speculating what things could mean in this new reality.
Yeah, well, that was fun, trying to figure out exactly what was different in that reality that led to this particular circumstance that didn't happen in the original timeline. I mean, it was fun. Sometimes they would give you a clue as to, the Shadow War didn't happen. But it didn't tell you more than just the company that sent the Icarus out there went out of business. Like, it didn't tell you why the company went out of business or anything like that. It didn't address, well, if that's the case, then, shall we say someone close to Sheridan who was on the Icarus, where is she?
Well, I was waiting for her on Zahadum. Like, the person who was talking over that radio device, it was a female.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that was Anna, but it was never stated.
Yeah, and then when the two Sheridans met each other, and the one Sheridan from that timeline that our Sheridan had jumped into, that was the one where the Icarus never went out to Zahadum. I was wondering, well, is Anna there somewhere?
Well, they didn't even know about it, because the joke was, as the proper Sheridan was getting ready to say Zahadum, and he realized this person knew nothing about it, he put boom on the ends. The joke was Zahaboom. There were little pieces of humor. Some of it worked, some of it didn't in this movie, but that was somewhat funny.
But I have a feeling Anna wasn't there. In fact, I'm not sure that Sheridan even knew her, even though, obviously, in the original timeline, they were married.
I mean, I didn't look at his hand to see if he had a wedding ring, but he might have, like, him and Anna might have been married, and he was just...
It seemed like he was, I wouldn't say jealous, but that he was surprised that that other version of him had someone like Delenn reaching across time and space.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then, I don't think Anna was in the picture for that particular Sheridan, or they must have split up. I don't know, but I don't think she was there.
So to give credit and another positive, the message of this movie throughout the whole movie was they were saying, I'm trying to remember what the line was. It was that quantum mechanics thing of an observer can change what's being observed. And they kept bringing that up. And then at the end of this, Delenn essentially willed herself with some help from Zathras to go after Sheridan and bring him back. This was, to me, very in line with the messaging that Babylon 5 has always done, where, yes, there are events, there are wars, there are all these big things going on, but it's individuals that make a difference in how the universe works. A single person can change the course of anything. And this was right in line with that. So it was a very Babylon 5 message that was being portrayed here. And Jakar, when Sheridan jumped into this segment where it was supposed to be, I think, somewhat representing the edge of where the rim would start.
Beyond the rim. Well, yeah, right at the edge of the rim.
And that was functioning in two ways. One was both him and Lita in the series were supposed to be taking a trip out there to explore. But also, since the actor who played Jakar died, that was also a nod to he's moved beyond, he's passed away. But Jakar was giving similar advice like that, where he was telling Sheridan, actions matter and you should really pay attention to what you're doing and you can make a difference here. And I don't remember the exact wordings he was given, but it was something very similar to that. And again, that's one of the reasons why I had trouble with the Jakar portrayal, because in the series, whenever Jakar said anything, I was riveted to what he was saying. I mean, his voice, the way, was it Andreas Katsoulis? The way he gave off the lines, like he had me focused. That was a very talented actor. And I'm not saying the voice actor wasn't, but he didn't grab me where I was like, every word I was just waiting to hear what this person was going to say. And so I don't know exactly what he said, because honestly, I don't remember. I'd have to watch it again. I've only seen this once. So I enjoyed this movie a lot, but I enjoyed it because this was in my opinion, a film intended almost entirely for the fan base. And that's a rare thing to be making nowadays, where you're actually making something that caters to the fan base of the series or the property you're making it for. Is there any value for somebody to watch this who's not a fan? I mean, I think there's enough here where you could figure out the story, where it's kind of self-contained, but all the Easter eggs they stuck in there, and there were a lot. To me, that's where this thing is fun. And my recommendation would be, if you're a Babylon 5 fan and you've watched Babylon 5 a couple times through, you've got to see this. It pays off in all the right places when it comes to being a Babylon 5 fan. But if you're only moderately into Babylon 5 or you're not into it at all, I mean, the artwork was nice in places, but I'm not sure this would really grab you like it did for Mollie and I, because we were picking up all these Easter eggs that were happening. And they were well done Easter eggs, not what they do in modern Hollywood now. I mean, there was intent when JMS was doing this stuff. It was really well done. So I would recommend it. I would give it a high rating if you're a Babylon 5 fan. And if you're not, I still think it's a good movie, but I don't think you're going to get nearly out of it as somebody who's a Babylon 5 fan.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anybody else watch this? What were your thoughts on this? How did you feel about the jumps in the alternate timelines? We would love to hear from you in the comments.
Take care.